many of these so-called underground artists don't like tooting their own horn, i.e., people like you. So while we are on the subject, Akos, for example, and I'll come to you, Poetra.
Moving
No,
on.
moving on. You, for example, speak a lot. You direct, produce plays. And one of the things I like, for example, is you speak a lot about our independence struggle, Ghana, that is, and women whose names have been consciously, unconsciously deleted from history. Speak to us about that and your work. It's a movement on its own. I beg, please toot your own horn.
Akosua goes in, I don't think that it's about tooting horn, because Akosua is doing the work.
Yeah.
She's tooting her horn, actually. It's just that the horn will be loud.
So make them louder.
Because it just, like, I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
She just say, pin, then the whole Ghana will hear.
The mic
Because
there,
this Akosua...
Hello and welcome to Curating Dreams, a creatives podcast. This is a series of conversations with two friends of mine, amazing individuals doing extraordinary things on social and professional and all other fronts, overflowing with compassion, love. Their opinion matters to me, and over the next few episodes, you'll see why. My name is Tettey, and I'm joined by...
Poetra Asantewa.
And I'm Akosua Hanson.
Today, we're discussing heavy on our minds 2020 protests and movements. Lord knows there's been a lot in 2020 to give us headaches, migraines. I feel like off the top of my head, it's BLM that comes first. That was the most standout movement. And for anyone who's been away from the planet in 2020, BLM started in 2013 following the acquittal of George Zimmerman after the shooting of Trayvon Martin. And then the next year there was Michael Brown, Eric Garner, the Ferguson protests, and then there were a couple of other incidents that led into like a worldwide movement, I should call it that. And I feel like a central theme in BLM and in many of the protests that mark this year is police brutality. That's where ladies dig in.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, right? The George Floyd protests were kind of like the spark of a lot of things this year, and I think bringing it to Africa, what makes that also special, if you're talking about that first, is the fact that was this the first or one of our preliminary times we actually had protests in Africa for Black Lives Matter. There was a bridging of that gap, and that was really important for me, because I remember in 2016 when I went to the Mandela Washington Fellowship, there was a lot of conversation with African Americans, right? And it was always, there's this divide between Africans on the continent and Africans there. And when we talk about Black Lives Matter, what does that even mean, right? Why should I care, And when we say Black Lives Matter, does that also include African lives in that conversation? And I feel like this year tested all of that. And so for me, it was great to see us also representing, trying to do George Floyd protests here on the continent too, right?
Yeah.
And I also feel like we've always wondered as creatives, as activists, where we can connect the dots, so that we don't have like separate movements, but we actually have like, after all, we are one family. Whatever happened in history, her story, we're from the same line. But I'm also thinking that a lot of BLM and many of the movements of this year started off, if not all, on social media. You're following hashtags and so on and so forth. We can never underplay the importance of social media, as a starting point for change. Right, Poetra?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd say starting point exactly, but it's definitely be an influential tool. It's been a new tool for pushing or elevating existing problems. And like you said, BLM started 2013, years ago, and it's been 7 years since BLM started. And it isn't that like George Floyd's death was like a different kind of death. It's the same issues that they're protesting, but it was like the rage built up.
And also we
Right.
saw evidence.
Yes.
Real
And
time.
there
Yeah.
had been evidence several years before, but like it was like the momentum built up, the rage built up, and finally people were just like, no, we can't keep doing the same thing. So I think it was just a coalition of several things, both in person, on the ground, and online. And like wildfire, it spread through all communities, and everybody was lending their voice, whether it was virtually or physically.
Then the frustration of COVID as well.
Yeah.
Perfect year.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, you realize when there's like inequality, when there's a place that's not comfortable, where there's a place that hits, is when there's like a year of war.
Yeah.
You know, like Black Lives Matter movements, the race riots, all of them from the during World War One. It came up, you know, when our soldiers even went to go and fight and they came back, they realized, hey, Charlie, they are fighting for democracy there, so why not us? And we eventually got independent out of that. Then World War II, same. World War years also bring all of the inequalities to surface, because everyone is now going to hear the inequality becomes deeper then. And this year, I feel like this year was just a war year, 2020. We came with COVID. But I mean, there have been epidemics before. But I don't know what made this year. This year was a epidemic year, but it was also a war year. But it wasn't a war year in a traditional World War thing. I don't know. It was,
And also this is one we lived, as in us.
yeah,
You
like
know,
we
as
are,
in
yeah,
us,
you know,
yeah.
we are on the TV
We don't
screen.
need books for it.
Yeah, we are.
But I also think epidemics in the world haven't affected the entire, at least in my lifetime.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but this was the
global.
it was a global thing.
Yeah.
Everybody was
So it
affected,
was, yeah.
and like the fact that our lives are threatened,
Yeah.
and we
Humanity,
have to fight
yeah.
something else, and like it was more rage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I feel like
Yeah.
it was. You know,
Yeah.
there's this thing saying that Sefi Atta says in one of her books, where she says nobody. I'm paraphrasing here, but she says something about nobody considers the wind until it knocks trees down, and then they say it's too much. Right, and so that's exactly what I feel like happened here. Like it's not as if there hasn't been rage in the past. It has. It was like we are already struggling with so much shit already, and this is something that we've continuously been talking about. And this year was like all of us hands in.
But I think one thing I can thank the pandemic for, if I can say that, is that we have a renewed sense of humanity across. You know, where we're no longer. I mean, they're all the separate issues, but to a large extent, I think if I could say, reasonable human being knows that now we're like, what comes first is the humanity that we're all sharing, you know, blood, you know, and how we will survive this year, next year. If we can get past these 2 years, then, you know. But
I agree wholly on that, and you can see how that was like you can see how that played out, for instance, in the endsars protest, right? If you don't mind, if we move,
I was getting to
like,
that. You read
know,
my mind.
I feel like what made endsars already, we all know how when it started before this year, but this year's was different in a sense that Nigerians spoke about how there was a merging of the class divides. You know, that class hierarchy was like, we now understand, like, one for all for one, you know. So I see that too. People are out there in the protest. The mask on a protester is like the image for this year. You know, that's like the 2020 image, the mask on a protester and the fist up or something. And people just didn't, all the divides we had before on class, you know. But I think there were still some clashes when it comes to representation of like queer people in the protests. I know during the endsars movement, there were people talking about, let's not say Black African queer lives also matter in all of this. Like, queer lives are also affected by police brutality by the SARS officers, right? But people were saying we don't want it to distract from the main thing. Meanwhile, queer people were forces in the endsars demonstrations.
And even in BLM as well.
And even in BLM, like everywhere.
Lives Matter.
You know?
Black trans.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about the similarities, you know, the humanity point that you made. If you're looking at the thread, it's the same for, again, BLM. It always started like it was only Black people who were protesting, but this year you could see all other communities joining, and it's similar to endsars because it was mostly the youth or those affected, even in that class divide. But now when endsars happened this year, it was everybody, whether you are rich, you are poor, you are middle class, everybody. And I think that's kind of the similarities, that this year we all came together, whether it's class divide, whether it's racial divide. This is a problem that has been persisting for a while. Same thing with, African queer lives matter, like Akosua said, and Black trans lives matter. And these arguments that within the protest, people were making, like people who were already protesting, like Black Lives Matter. Let's fight this. Their argument was, let's fight this before we do Black trans lives matter. And the argument that it can't happen. Yeah. It's not possible because this is a platform. Once we have a voice, then we need to bring in all our issues, which is a very valid point.
Because unfortunately, a lot of the time, I feel like we have like central causes and so-called peripheral causes. You know that you have. You were discussing this earlier. Like you have a maybe Black Lives Matter, and we don't want anything to possibly contaminate it. The impact is. But we can't have justice on one front without having justice across board. So it doesn't add up. But there are two things that I'm wondering about. Do we feel like one of the movements or a couple of the movements served as propellers for other movements all over the world? Or say, for example, BLM maybe inspired or encouraged activists in other parts to also come out strong, and like SARS on other fronts in the continent. And then let's go with that first. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'll phrase it that way. What I would say is, because endsars has been an existing trend, I would say is that we are borrowing tools from every place that the protest is happening. And so, for instance, I've spoken about this before. I was in Chicago when the Black Lives Matter.
How was that experience?
And it was terrifying. It was the first time I saw a state against these people. And it felt weird because it's almost like a mother and a child, and the mother deliberately says, I'm not letting you in. Out with the dogs, that kind of thing. And so it was terrifying, but it was also the place where I saw community come together. It was the first time I saw, and I if anybody asks me how's my experience of Chicago, I always say it's cold, and I'm not just talking about the weather, I'm talking about the people too. Everybody is, to themselves, but it was during the protest that I saw community come together, both in the Black community and other communities who could contribute. And I think I saw that in the endsars as well. It wasn't as if the Nigerians didn't know how to come together as a community, but I think we were all learning, if you can't be in person, if you can't be on the field, on the streets, you can be online, you can send these letters, and I think even there are people still asking, do these letters work if we send letters second? But we are saying, do it. Do it. Let's try if it's worked. Let's know what works and what doesn't. But we can never know until we actually do it. And I think that's something that, for instance, we learned from the Western world. Because I'm seeing, I don't think I want to write to my mayor. I don't even know who my mayor is. But it starts with something, using the tools that we have currently.
One thing that impressed me with the endsars movement, I received a bunch of WhatsApp messages. Very detailed instructions, if I should put it, on what you can do if you really care and want to help. Who you should email, their email addresses. At the UN, your ministers, call for sanctions against government officials, what hashtags to use. So we're in a generation where you can't say, I want to help, but I didn't know what I could do. We don't have that excuse anymore.
And also one thing that I really, really laughed about, some people were questioning the impact of sending letters to local governors within Nigeria, and others were saying, okay, if you feel like this won't work, the problem starts in our homes, right? So how mothers and aunties are able to send WhatsApp trends, let's also start sending WhatsApp messages, educating people about SARS. And it was just like, okay, maybe this letter to governor, you don't believe in it, but this, that WhatsApp, you've been complaining on Twitter about how who is sending your mother WhatsApp messages? You to do something that will go viral. And that was just like a way of looking at international solutions for local solutions. How can we tweak it to help us? And that was really something I was impressed by, and I hope it's something we keep looking at.
But we've started talking about the continent with endsars. This, on a personal note, I feel like there are some movements, protests that get more traction than others. That's a different topic for another day, of who decides. I mean, I think sometimes we talk about this as creatives, where we say that whoever owns the media channels obviously decides, and then if you want to push your quote-unquote agenda, you also have to start telling your own story, you know. But on the continent, I'm wondering about other movements besides endsars. I know there was one in Namibia, for example. It's called Shut It Down.
Shut it all down.
Shut It All Down. In Zimbabwe, there was one.
Zimbabwean lives
Zimbabwean
matter.
Lives Matter.
Congo is bleeding.
Congo. There was Sudanese protests as
so
well,
many
you know.
protests in Africa.
Yeah.
You know.
And then this year too has also been an election year for a lot of African countries. So there's also that side of protests that's also been happening. I don't like to add that necessarily to the human rights protests. But yes, there's also that side. That also comes with
Definitely.
And human rights, you brought up an issue. Do you feel like, you know, we're earlier talking about like central and peripheral causes, issues, movements. Do you feel like, for example, women's rights this year took a back burner somehow, some way? Did we see enough of? I know there were, you know, for example, the Yellow Vest movement. It's largely credited to two women who started the movement online as well. There's even a Women in Yellow Vest movement that doesn't get enough publicity, unsurprisingly. We had 16 days of activism, as usual, this year. Yeah. And apparently...
Shut it down, or shut it all down, Namibia.
Yeah. You go.
I feel like asking that question presumes that women issues have always been at the forefront. But for me, what it is women have always been leading causes, whether it is for women or not. And that's always been the struggle. Like even for this year, when Black Lives Matter, there was also the topic that every time Black Lives Matter goes viral, it is a man who is being slighted. But whenever the women are and they are protest, the men don't support full on like the women do. Like the women are always a fact.
By
like
the way, it was
solid
initiated
factor.
by women as well.
Exactly.
And
Even the
protests
Black
too.
Tuesday, the
The
Black
Tuesday,
Square.
yes.
You know, it was initiated by
By
women.
woman, yeah.
And so like women are always doing these things. But when it comes to our issues getting the same attention and the same impact, we don't get that support. So I don't think it's just this year for me. I think it's just something that we've been fighting about constantly. Yeah.
I would say, I'll add that there's actually even been a general unrest, or even if we won't call it protests or movements, even just on my Twitter timeline, you can just sense energies. You can just sense a fed upness. There was a time this year where on Ghanaian Twitter, a lot of women started this thing of naming their rapists on Twitter. And there was no fear of, what if I would be and police and stars that we know who are music stars here in Ghana were named, you know, and that wasn't a protest or a movement, but that was a protest too. And at that point in time, it was like a non-fed upness. I'm tired of this rape stuff. I'm tired of this. Let's just name. It has its pros and cons, but let's just name. It was also that unrest that was happening. So I feel like our voices too have, even if it doesn't go in the traditional protest movement, in other ways we've been trying to show things, you know, as well as being central in the major movements. NSAS, everyone talks about the feminist coalition, who were instrumental in organization, you know, where it's safe for people to get medicine and drugs, organizing everything, even places where to go and pee and stuff during the protests, you know. And then obviously legal team, WhatsApp messages, online protesting,
even afterwards,
so well structured.
Maybe my knowledge is limited, but it's the most well structured
Can we talk
protest
about that?
I've ever seen. I'm so in awe and in love with these women.
Whenever we think about protests, we always just see, the first thing that people see is the people on the street with their fists in the air. But no, a protest is really the groundwork, the one planning. Is like a general and an army. Let's plan the movement. This is where people are going to go. If they're going to walk this way, this is where they're going to get stops for food. This is where they're going to get stops for water. What's going to happen when police come? Well, you are the one who has to think of all these other things. Even where pictures of brutality are supposed to happen. For you to strategically use it for your movements, you know, it's deep deep thinking.
I mean, it's very layered, it requires such critical thinking organization. You were mentioning earlier today about the movement that cut across Mexico, Turkey,
So,
against femicide and violence against women.
There's an artist group for women called Las Tesis, and last year, 2019, they performed at the International Women's Day, and they have this song. It's a song that is kind of like a chant, where they performed it with Pussy Riot. So the song went viral, and basically the song is saying, how many times do we have to talk about men raping women for rape to end? You are the rapist. The rapist is the judge. The rapists are the cops. The rapist is the patriarchy. And, just using art, breaking it down. And they put bandages on their eyes to signify injury, like women who have been injured, and they did a formation dance. After that, the performance went viral. It was used, so that was the format for the protest. Mexico, Turkey, Madrid, everywhere, like over 45 countries, women would just go and stand in front of government buildings and chant the song. And and that's what I loved, in their languages. It wasn't like it was just English, and it was in their individual languages, and that would be it. And then the Turkey MP did the same performance in the Parliament House.
Untouchable.
Right, and so it also talks about, right? It also talks about where, like, the impact is sown across. And that's what I think really protest needs movement. It can't be like a one-man thing. It can't be a one community thing. Like, we have to cut across. It started from an art stage, and then it moved into the streets, and then it moved into the parliament houses, and that's what's supposed to happen. Our voices aren't supposed to be, shouted out and that's it. It's stuck in the tunnel. But it's supposed to ricochet over all the platforms, and then we all come together. And it was very impressive, because the Turkey MP finished doing the dance, and she was like, Turkey is the only place where, because she's an MP, she can't do this in the parliament, but people should have the right to be able to talk about these issues. And there shouldn't exist the fact that she has to do this means that their parliament is problematic, and that's what it is. Imagine that this started with just an artist,
and speaks to the power of the arts. A reminder we know, and the place of the creative, and as three creatives extraordinaire. So what would you say are the roles of the creative at times like this? I mean, clearly we're speaking about the issues. That's one. But, what else can we do, and are we doing,
I mean, I can talk about Ghana, because I feel like if it's generalized, it's hard to tweak it to our local. And it's not that I would say that Ghanaian creatives haven't, tried to protest. I feel like different artists have, at different points, used their voices in creative ways. But what can you do that can spark across? And I mean, that's something that I'm waiting for one person
and effect
to do.
change.
If anything, the one thing that comes to mind was Yvonne Nelson 2016, the Doomsaw March, right? But even that was a conventional protest. It wasn't necessarily a creative, even though it was done, it was led by a creative. It wasn't, and so I would say yes, people will come and rap about, honestly, I have a huge problem with our industry. People will come and talk about one thing and it's just in the song, but like when it comes to living it out, it's a completely different thing. Someone will come and say, okay, don't do this, but when the opportunity comes to eat off it. And I think even this election series, people were saying, oh, your same artists are taking money to do campaign songs, but when it's a normal year, there'll be the same people complaining against. So like, where are you?
When it gets hot, you switch.
And then there's an argument that, well, they have to eat. If there was a good structure, they wouldn't be forced to do this. So like, where's the balance? Where do we decide that is there any layer of integrity, or integrity doesn't matter if you are hungry?
It's funny you say this. The other day I was just thinking, I was writing a song, and I was just thinking, like, is love sometimes a luxury? Like, if you had to think about survival, I mean, and this is probably taking it. This is Sister Sentiment taking it on another level. But but really, if you have to think about where to sleep, what to eat next,
you'll find love.
Yeah,
it'll be hard, but you'll find love. It's like saying that there's not going to be air if you're thinking of survival. Like, it's gonna be there. It's just being aware, or just being reminded that even if I'm coming home to just Gary or whatever, the fact that I'm able to, pat your hand and be like, thank you for being here, or just whatever is whatever. But I want to piggyback off of the question you asked on the role of art. I feel like artistic activism, whenever I say that line, I think of Poetra. Poetra with the song.
Drum roll.
See me with all of that, and we don't give enough props to the artist. I feel like the artist is the artist. The artist is the one who creates a protest, right, or a movement. Is different parts of the playing field. You need those on the ground who will march. You need those before them who will plan where they are marching to. You need those who are planning what will happen when there's violence. You need those who plan the violence, even if it's needed. You need those, all of that. And the artist is the heart of it. The artist is the soul. The artist is the crux. The artist is the symbol. So for me, the artist could be someone who did a song 10, 20 years ago and died. That was their artistic activism. And then we picked up their song today to use to march for endsars. That was their role in it.
Yeah. But I also think one of the problems, again, Ghana, that the artist impact is platform, right? Like, for instance, the example I was given about Las Tesis, this isn't their first protest song, or this isn't their first rebellious song.
But this is the one that caught fire.
But this is the one that they got a platform to, and
because they work with Pussy Riots, right?
Yes, but they had the platform to perform, like, say, International Women's Day, right?
And also the year as a catalyst, this 2020, I guess.
With a huge audience. And more often than not, the artists who get these platforms aren't that revolutionary. I don't know how
I get what you mean. In their politics.
Yes, in their politics. Or, aren't that cornet, or,
and that's always
and
what
that's
we get,
all, that's also another problem, because there are artists on the ground, we call them underground, who are doing the work. But you can be doing the work, but if there's no audience to elevate, to support,
and because
so far that you can
many
go.
of these so-called underground artists don't like tooting their own horn, i.e. people like you. So while we are on the subject, Akos, for example, and I'll come to you, Poetra.
Moving on.
No, moving on. You, for example, speak a lot. You direct, produce plays. And one of the things I like, for example, is you speak a lot about our independence struggle, Ghana, that is, and women whose names have been consciously, unconsciously deleted from history. Speak to us about that and your work. It's a movement on its own. I beg, please toot your own horn.
Akosua goes in, I don't think that it's about tooting horn, because Akosua is doing the work. She's tooting her horn, actually. It's just that the horn will be loud.
So make them louder.
Because it just, like, I wish it was that easy. She just say pin, then the whole Ghana will hear.
The mic there,
because
you're
this
there.
Akosua, like, the Ashikinsha, the play about,
and that was by Angela
right?
Drama Queens,
yes, but it was your platform. Like, you have created a platform to get, and I was thinking, how great would it be if this play was shown on TV3?
I know,
I
right?
don't watch TV chat, but when something happens on TV, I see it trending on Twitter. Something small, if it's whack, if it's good, you will see. It was like, these are in Ghana still traditional media reigns. So what if, and this play was like, 15, 20 minutes? It wasn't long. If it had just been there, just once.
Ashikisha, tell us about Ashikisha,
Right.
and then and other things.
Well, so Ashikishan was actually directed by Angela Otu, who is someone who wasn't interested in theater at all. That's not her field. And when she joined Drama Queens, it became part of her work.
Drama Queens is
Drama Queens is a youth activist organization, an under 30 organization. So I officially became too old. So don't be calling me to be speaking for the new directors. I beg you. But yes, Ashikishan was basically a story also written by Selassie Kwashi. I hope I got the name right. There are two names. I hope it's Selassie Kwashi. And basically what they wanted to do was focus on the story of a fictionalized story of a woman who fought for independence. It was part of, funding the CPP, funding the rallies, funding where they go and hype people up and go and do. There's a plan in the organizing of the movements, of the protests, which women always do, but always are excluded from. So that's this is me now using my skills. So Poetra, Asantewa,
Asantewa, now on
you, I want to
Lights
know you. I feel like, let me say this to you today. I feel like you've been a powerful juggernaut in the
second emotion.
Ghanaian art space, in creating art, in creating space for art, and just also building connections. We never really we weren't friends like that, but all the time whenever it's worker Poetra, me too, whenever it's anything Poetra, like we are not friends like that where we go and sit in our houses, and but we understood,
You know,
it's like we understood our
energy.
roles
Yeah.
in the movement.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to know, as you started this journey, when I met you all those years ago, you just seemed so certain and so sure of where you were going and what you were doing. But I sensed I was an unconscious direction.
It's definitely unconscious because I'm always uncertain. But I think I've said this several times. My parents are artists. Both parents. My mother is a jill of all trades. My mother can paint, she can sew, she can draw. I don't think there's anything that you can ask my mother to do and just give her a few hours to, and she won't be able to. And my father's a writer. But these people are doing nothing in that direction. And I just wonder how different their lives would have been if they existed in a world which catered to the kind of people they were. And of course, all my siblings are artists. We all either draw or write or paint or do something. And so I was thinking, I can't continue this generation. There has to be a world in which I feel like... So almost everything I do, I'm thinking, if I had this, I feel like I would have been awesome years ago. Like when I was a teenager, I would have started like all these opportunities. And really, I feel like that's what I'm trying to build my life, or the work I'm doing around me is I can't even wait for another generation before we start building the systems that will help them be the really. So that's what guides me.
But
and in a way, maybe, you know, coming back to protests, what does protest look like in Ghana, in Accra, especially where it's not easy to just get up and say I'm going to do a protest.
I was going the
Protests
next.
are stifled. Like you have to send a letter.
Yeah. What? I mean, how did for example the BLM protest in Accra turn out?
The George Floyd protest. I went for that. It was crazy. It was crazy. The military man actually came with a cane.
Oh wow.
Actually came with a cane.
Abba.
Yeah, and there were also respected people there. It was like at that point they didn't even seem to care. You know? Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I saw pictures and videos. I think they threw tear gas.
Yeah.
That was the EFF. They were the ones who organized it. Right?
Yes.
They Fighters Front. Fighters Front.
Yes.
And I think their leader was arrested. I forget his name.
He has a court case.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, so because I know that in very subtle ways, something is happening within the Ghanaian community.
Yeah.
Seeing all these protests happening, even when endsars, and I think there's a connection between Ghana and Nigeria. I mean,
Charlie, Big Brother.
So Ghanaians were very affected.
I was affected. I was there like crying. Like,
exactly. And so, and I also think we're also thinking about ourselves in our country. What would make us protest? And just before you even think about this, you know that you can't protest, right? So, are we going to keep? Okay, that's it. In which ways, or in which, how can protests look like and be as impactful as the traditional protests that we see in Ghana?
I mean, election 2020 was not the most fantastic of our elections. Apparently, Africa looks up to us as a beacon of hope, that phrase that we love to. But, you know, there were so many pockets of unrest and violence. I'm thinking about Tettey South, for example, where they opened fire, like live ammunition. I mean, how? You know? We could go through tear gas, through rubber bullets. That's even the canes, not your canes. The canes that, you know, batons. How do we get there? And we still haven't heard like any. I mean, I haven't. Maybe I've missed it. Any person from a government official or government talk about how they plan to address. I heard, you know, the security agency say there will be an investigation. You know, but like really, 2020.
So the first thing I would say is, and that's something that I'm coming to terms with this year again with the protest. So for instance, and people were saying endsars isn't the first time the youth have come. It's the first time everybody is acknowledging, even if it's not affected. But the thing is, in Nigeria, is it earlier this year or last year, the North over 200 people were killed, right? And you would think that that amount of people would come together, but they didn't. And that was because they weren't directly impacted. And I suspect, or I strongly know, that the same thing happens in Ghana. It isn't like this is the first time there are deaths or there are unrest. It's, again, there's a class divide. There is
What gets highlighted.
What gets highlighted. We are less affected by these things. And it's, my question is, like, how do we sensitize the entire country so that we are all concerned about all of us, right? And it doesn't have to happen to a group of people only, or it doesn't have to happen to all of us before we are all enraged or we are all involved.
There's this thing that we joke about, like amongst Ghanaians even, that we are just very lukewarm and very comfortable. Is it because excuse me to say, the shit hasn't hit the fan hard enough that we're not there yet, you know? That because, for example, like Nigeria, we always compare and say that, you know, where the softer ones and our Nigerian sisters and brothers are the more quote unquote aggressive ones because of what they deal with day to day. Is it that we need more fire, unfortunately?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that like, when it comes to attitudinal country things, I feel like if Ghana were a person, it would be a grumbling teenager who always grumbles at the, like, you know.
Yeah.
But when you ask
Not loud
them
enough.
to like articulate what it is,
I didn't say
they will be
anything.
quiet. Exactly. And that's Ghanaians, right? And Nigerians they will shout, but the person or the guardian is like a wicked stepfather who does not give two fucks, right? So it's also about, like, it's the structure that's in place. And for me, I think, yes, we have that general attitudinal thing that's being said, but it's hard for me to say yes because that's how we do. I think it's a bigger picture of the structure that we have in place. We don't have a very transparent accountability structure or atmosphere that allows us to communicate. Like, what if, when it's election time, they are able to vote. They're able to go everywhere, campaign everywhere. There are districts, there are MPs. Why isn't it that the people, even at the lowest level, why isn't there a smooth communication channel? That if I see problem, there's been rubbish in my neighborhood for 1 week and I know that it's causing something, I should be able to call my district's office and say, what are you doing about it? Or like how in New Zealand, the president, after a year, says, in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you what we've done. Why can't our DCs do that?
Lovely.
I'm going to tell you what we've done.
Rundown.
6 months, 6 minutes. We should have these like.
Or when you do something, why you resign, but we don't
know
have
who
that.
my
Yeah.
DC is. Like, and I don't care. And I think it's because of the structure.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it's my life. It's just me. I'm not looking up to anybody. And that's not how it should be, really.
I have a friend who says he doesn't vote because he's his own Ghana water and sewage electricity.
It's a luxury. It's a
He couldn't be
luxury,
bothered.
We don't even notice it because it's so innate. But if it was it's just like saying you live in your house with your parents, but like, yeah, I'm paying my own bills.
Yeah.
I'm paying meanwhile you're living under how? Yeah. That's exactly how Ghana is.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, that attitudinal thing is there because of a system. And we need to start dismantling. That's the correct word.
Yeah, that's the
dismantling
word.
that system.
Why were you brought for him?
I know, right? Right. We need to like how we've been brave about, and you know, you are saying that Africa is saying Ghana is the election, and yes, in some ways, I felt like this election was very chill, even though all elections are chill. But you can see it in the voting pattern. This is the first time there's been such a
Parliamentary from
never hear some
presidential.
before.
They were saying something.
And then there was an entire town that refused to vote
in the north.
Right? And I'm thinking these are the things because, you know, I guess the same with the EFF. They started a campaign with a no vote campaign. And
Economic Fighters Front.
I admire the genuinity of the idea, but I questioned the impact because, again, it's an online protest, and I'm just wondering, first of all, the people online, if you can afford data every day,
I know, right?
you are not part
Credit
of
the
struggling
costs.
Ghanaians.
Hey.
And so it's really, if you decide not to vote, it's a luxury. It's not because you don't want to vote, right? People have different reasons for why they don't want to vote. And for me, seeing an entire town coming together, grassroots. That's what I'm saying. It's a two thing. We can't just say it's only the virtual world or hashtags that have really done the work, but it can't happen without on the ground work.
You touched something I'm very interested in, passionate about, and I have very strong sentiments about, but about voting and it being a luxury, for example. Is the impact meaningful, especially in Ghana where we have two major political parties, MPP, NDC? Isn't it like voting for, I don't know, birds of the same feather? Really, is there a difference? I don't know.
Are you asking, is there a
The
difference
voting.
in the two, or is
Will
that
your
voting
votes make a
impactful?
difference? Because you just bring one of the other.
Yeah, I think they do. I think whether we like it or not, like the country exists within a structure, again, like a system. And like I mentioned, there has been a parting this year. Goom, right? That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, goom.
Yeah, I've been seeing.
Means I was saying Gum, but actually when I came, like when I go back to Ghana, the first, and I don't watch TV. I don't have a TV. I'm not interested in TV. But and my parents were watching this channel, and there was this pastor, Osofu Chiribo, some. And like he has a channel of his own, and literally the programs are 40% campaigning.
Oh wow.
Right.
Wow.
40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 40% campaigning, 40%
Political campaigning.
about for GUM.
Hey.
40% religion, like talking about that, and 20% music arts. Right? These are the things. It's politics, religion, and arts. That's what was happening on the channel all the time. And everything, like he would talk about Nkrumah, what this government was doing. And I was wondering, this is interesting. I was glued. This is interesting. And so to see the effect of that in our voting, they suppressed all that is a difference. And it's because like I said, you're asking this question, you have a point. It's innate. We've had this voting pattern for years. Every day is NDC and
White, green, red, or white, blue.
People will see independence and like, I like you, but I know that you anyway, so I won't vote. So the fact that GUM has been able to get this means people know that they can make a difference.
Dying for a third option.
That's protesting.
For the longest time. Yeah.
That is protesting. The mere fact that GUM started the party, progressed, had members, independent, had representatives, and that people voted. They I don't think they surpassed CPP. CPP hasn't gotten those remarks in years, in over 12 years.
But also
like the
CPP has been
default.
a divided front for a while now.
I mean, I would say there's also the thing about this no voting thing.
Yeah.
God, it's come up. It's crazy
The
that's come up
illusion of
now
choice.
because. Like last week, I was like challenged, and I've been challenged over it several times. Because if you call yourself an active citizen, right, what does it mean? And I've come to define an active citizen. You can use the power of your vote, to decide the bigger structure things, right, and then also being in the community, and doing what you can in your way. An active citizen in those parts. I feel like I've not voted, and I'm not someone who is always inclined to vote because I've always been
I didn't want to say
on the yes. I mean, but I want to be truthful with it.
Clean
and I've been challenged several times. If I call myself an activist, if I call myself a citizen of the country, why do you not vote? I'll say I cannot answer the vitriol behind all of that if it comes from it. And I probably am breaking a specific code. But what I try to do my best is to be an active citizen. I feel like even if I'm not voting, then let me try to do what I can in the community. We spoke about how it's not easy for you to just go to your district community leader. We don't have town halls, do we? We do? I don't even know. But do we actually have town halls where they call us to come sit and talk?
I think that's the same thing. We have
that's the same
but
assembly
some
halls.
communities they're not in use. They are empty.
Mine, I don't think it has been for since I've lived there. So it's not even part of my reality till I left the country. Then I discovered, that can happen where you can immediately. So my way of doing it is try to be in the community and try to give community space. Try to build where I can. Try to plant a tree where I can. Try to when I say plant a tree, I mean figuratively. In all the work we do in our art, in our whatever. I feel like the death, or the parts where you can't come back from is you don't vote and you're not an active citizen in any other way.
But because I think that's Ghana's problem. It shouldn't be an end all. It should be both,
Okay.
right? I think it should be both because, okay, I'm an active citizen, and there are women in the community who can't afford something, so we come together as a community and we say, let's help these single mothers or pregnant women. And then one day somebody gets seriously ill and we need to take themselves, and the roads are so bad. By the time we get it, the person died. Who is going to work on the road?
Yeah.
We have to vote into somebody who is into our interests,
Yeah.
so that the person,
But the person who they built the road for in my area, it was when the MP moved to my area. That's when they actually built the street in front of my house. As I speak to you today, my place outside, we no get road still now.
Wait another
It be
four.
the path where
Another
the
four.
MP house
Yeah.
day, where road day. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
it's
so when I say
Ghana.
citizenship, maybe we would also probably, I can try to raise money if I can eventually, or whatever I can to mobilize and create roads. It's like what my father does in our
Which
in
is
our
what we
space.
usually do.
Which
Yeah.
communities
Yeah.
do. Fathers, mothers, in their
You fill
community
the potholes. You
fill
don't
the
wait.
potholes,
Yeah.
fill water,
But
fill
it's not everything
you know.
that can be done
It's
by
not
community.
everything.
Yeah.
That's a sad thing.
And I think for me, that's my argument about it should be. And a lot of Ghanaians are, okay, I vote and that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, but that's not
Next,
where it
that's
ends.
not what it should be. Both. You're working in the community, they are voting, and I think that's really what Ghana needs.
Hey, you,
That's what Ghana
I hear
needs.
you next voting. Let's talk. Let's see.
you sisters gather.
Come and force
You
me.
guys-
Achie.
You know, wait till next vote in 4 years.
Okay, you
No.
are here.
You guys, you
watch
gather
how we'll see
Vemo,
we'll
but
talk.
we run out of time, Charlie.
Oh wow. Okay.
But
okay.
so to wrap up, and we knew this would be delicious, but it's many episodes are coming. I told you these ladies, Charlie. Anyway, so two things. How do we? I mean, we're clearly interested, and you guys are just a representation of the youth across the continent. I know that, like, if not all, we're awake and very interested in helping each other. How do we connect the dots very quickly? And then also, when you guys plug into all of the movements around the world and become empathetic and do things, how do you help yourself? Like, what's your self-care? So, yeah.
I forget the first question.
Oh, Charlie, they go too much. How do we connect the dots? How do we? Yeah.
Between what?
The movements in Africa first. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Museveni must go, for example. How do we help?
Also, like a rounding up of our conversation
Yeah.
today. Okay.
The way forward.
The way forward. So all I'll add is a shout out to all the shadow workers and the shadow workers creating movements. There's a lot of movements that are happening and a lot of protests that are happening that are not on the surface for anyone to see. And it's happening and things are changing.
And Fireborn any media houses intentionally silencing those movements if you do it intentionally.
No,
Sorry.
these ones are intentionally silenced by the creators and organizers of the movements. That's what I mean by the shadow workers and the shadow movement builders.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's because there also has to be that.
The kingmakers are not the king.
Yes.
Sort of.
You know, there also has to be that where, you know, for certain things to happen, unfortunately, because of the way our world is. And I've seen things happen in revolutionary ways that you can't even, if you pinpoint, oh, this is where it led up to Yusuf, you go shock, you know, but that is where it really started. So shout out to all of them is what I'll say. And self-care, man, that's what 2020 is supposed to remind us, right? That's COVID reminded us, especially me, heavily of my humanity, my death, my mortality. Death is like a reigning thing forefront of my mind this year. I don't know why. And when that happens, when you're faced with the reality of your mortality, like all of this, like this is just a limp body, you start to think, what then? Care about meaning in life, you know, care about love, and love is in everything. You don't have to try to get something before you get there. And with love comes care. Your food, your body, your mind, the people you put around you, the energies you put around you. And as artists yourselves who are also in the work of building, you yourselves, your art is also your healing. You know, once it stops being your healing, know someone's taking something from it. That's where you continuously heal. So that's where I'll wrap up.
Thanks, Akos.
I think, you know, to bring it all, it's happening. It's not something that, you know, we'll think about later. But, you know, just thinking about our individuality in the collectiveness. And when endsars was happening, how could I help? Yes, you can, and it was in several ways. You can elevate, retweeting, blah, blah, blah. It was also, talking, having conversations in your own community, like talking with your parents, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. It's not happening here, but maybe there's another version here. And also thinking about, like for me a lot, I've been thinking about how do we solve the issues here? Like, do we wait till it becomes so loud
to fixing home before we look elsewhere?
And it's just really thinking about that, and just like you mentioned earlier, if on the justice has to be for all of us, and so just thinking how can we participate, contribute in other people's injustice without burning out, which segues into self-care, and self-care really is a daily practice, something that you continuously do, and it will look different in different days. It's just acknowledging that, because you can't pour out of an empty cup.
Drink more of your favorite cocktail.
It's something I'm always, thinking of, and whenever I feel overwhelmed, I always try to like take a pause and just do whatever I need to do to be able to breathe and come back with a renewed sense of purpose.